Hey guys, it's Scott with Scottie B Cards, and in this video, I want to look at 3 players who are breaking out this year and what that means for their baseball cards. We have a couple of videos now where players are overperforming and underperforming. What about players who are breaking out? Every year there are players who break out from their previous performance. That can mean they were bad, now they're really good. That can mean they were good, now they're really, really good, and so forth. So in this video, I want to look at 3 players who are in the top 10 in WAR according to Fangraphs and Baseball Reference, and look at to see if their breakout's real and to see if their cards might be a good buy. The thing I will say though is I want you to tell me based off of the stuff I'm showing you if you think they're a good buy. So let's show this off. The very first thing. So here we can see Baseball Reference WAR. We have Wander Franco at the top, Acuna, Bichette, Simeon, Freeman, Chapman, Kiermaier, and so forth. And then we have Fangraphs WAR. It's a pretty similar list. Zach Gallen and Sean Murphy at the top. Sean Murphy gets a boost because he's a catcher, and Fangraphs WAR gives catchers better framing numbers on their WAR total, while Baseball Reference does not, which is why he's there. But outside of Sean Murphy, we have Wander Franco at the top as a position player still. So this list, all these stats are from Sunday. So just to be aware, because they might be a little bit behind, but overall, these numbers are what this video is based off of. So let's just jump into the first player. I'm going to ignore players like Acuna and Freeman because they've already broken out. Freeman won an MVP. Acuna is one of the biggest hobby darlings that we have in baseball cards. So we'll start with Bo Bichette. And I can hear Blue Jays fans yelling at me saying, it's not breaking out. He's been good for a long time. I know he's been good. Last year he had an 802 OPS with a 129 OPS plus. That's really good, really similar to his career. But this year he really has taken his game to the next level. He's actually led the league in hits 3 years in a row. But this year his batting average is 338, and justifiably so. On top of that, he leads baseball in offensive WAR at 2.9. And the biggest thing I like about Bo Bichette so far this year is defensively, he's really turned it around with 0.5 DWAR. And according to almost every defensive metric, he's been at least average. And we can look at all of them and see what those numbers show. But overall, Bo Bichette, he is a hits machine. He does not walk hardly at all. You know, we can look, his walk rate's always between 3 to 5%, which is not good. But when you're a free swinger with only 40 walks, 137 strikeouts, 41 walks, 155 strikeouts, that's just what his game is. Is that sustainable? Is that going to be able to be enough for Bichette? Will he gain the ability to walk as he gets older? We'll see. I would have to imagine that he has the opportunity to walk more if he wants because he is such a good hitter. People probably pitch around him, but he wants to hit the ball, and that's what we're seeing with his numbers. If you look at his percentile rankings, you'll see his expected batting average is 100th percentile, meaning the highest in baseball. His expected batting average is 343, so that's what he's expected to be hitting based off of the quality of contact he's making, average exit velocity, the launch angle, the location where he hit it, and so forth. So that's really good. Basically, he is not getting necessarily lucky with this 338 batting average. We see that a lot of empty batting averages with just singles that are lucky kind of thing, but with Bichette, that's not the case at all. And his actual slugging is still really high. His expected slugging is 94th in all of Major League Baseball. His walk percentage again is only 5.3%. Not ideal. You'd love to see him get that higher, but again, if that's his game, and that's okay. His sprint speed, arm strength, outs above average is slightly below average according to these metrics, but again, like we've shown, he's relatively average on defense, which is better than where he was before. So here's outs above average. This is a StatCast metric that takes into consideration how far you range for a ball, if you got to the balls in your area, and so forth. Last year, Bo Bichette had -7 outs above average for the year. This year, he's at -1. You know, one good defensive game, and that could be back at 0. So, or even positive out 1. So that's a big step for him. On top of that, with defensive runs saved, here are the 2023 shortstop position leaders. Bo Bichette, right now, has actually saved 2 defensive runs for 2023, which is good. Last year, he was third to last with -14. He had a really bad defensive season, which is why his WAR totals weren't higher. But overall, he has improved greatly right there as well. Again, I do want to show his on base is not great. Here is the league average, batting average, on base, slugging, and OPS. His batting average is 90 points higher than league average, but his on base is only about 56 points higher. You'd love to see that be better. His slugging, though, is 128 points higher. So overall, he's doing significantly better than league average, which we're seeing with that 154. This is WRC plus. This is similar to OPS plus, where it looks at 100 as league average. It's just the Fangraphs equivalent. It takes into consideration a couple other different factors. But overall, similar 150-ish type player with WRC plus, meaning he's 54% better than league average, and it's just good to see. But again, love to see his on base get higher. He's never really had an OBP above 350 outside of this year, so that might regress slightly, but we'll see what happens. But here are his cards. This is where I need you to let me know what your thoughts are. Bo Bichette, he debuted in 2019, had his rookie cards in 2020. 2020 is when we really saw a huge increase in card production, right? We saw it in 2018, it really started. 2019, there were some, but 2020 is where everybody was buying cards and there were just a ton of products on shelves for a long time. So he is still down 41% from 2022, which is crazy. And that might have been just because the market's down. But overall, he has a lot of rookie cards, but are his cards undervalued? That's a question I want to ask you. Let me know what your thoughts are, because it's crazy to see his performance and see him be down this much year over year. As we are seeing with his sales volume, he is going up right now, which is good because that means that people are recognizing the year he's having. So maybe that window is closing for Bo Bichette. But overall, I want to hear your thoughts on if you think, based off what we looked at, if this breakout's real, if you think his cards are going to be worth a fortune in the future. One thing I want to point out, he was good before. I'm not saying he wasn't, but this year is just the next step potentially for him from a star to superstardom. And next up, we have Wander Franco, and he's another player who has been discussed in the hobby since he was drafted, essentially, or signed in 2019 when he had his Bowman Chrome autograph. His cards have always been expensive, but we can see same thing with Wander Franco. He has gone from a 120-ish OPS plus guy to a 140-ish OPS plus guy, meaning now he's 40% better than league average. He has 2.5 offensive WAR, 1.2 D WAR, 3.5 total WAR, which leads Major League Baseball, and his defense is first in Major League Baseball according to multiple metrics. But let's look at his numbers. He's a switch hitting shortstop. He looks like he's breaking out, but is this a fluke? Is he too injury prone? Do we think his cards could have value, or is he like Bo Bichette, but even more extreme with so many rookie cards? I do want to show his DRS. He's actually first in Major League Baseball with all shortstops right now with 9 total runs saved and basically pretty far ahead of everybody. Then we can see right here, this is outs above average for all players, not just shortstops, but right now he is tied for third with Javier Baez for all baseball players with outs above average. And we can look at his percentile rankings again, 100th percentile, top 1% Major League Baseball on defense. His speed is actually not as fast as you'd expect for being so young, but still above average. And a lot of things that he does is just impressive. His expected batting average is good, not as good as Bo Bichette by any means, but still really good at a 291 expected batting average. But he doesn't have necessarily the hardest hit balls consistently. His average exit velocity is below average. Hard hit percentage is less than half the time, but he does make up for it in other parts of his game. I do want to look at his splits. It's something I always poke at with Wander Franco. I will show that his righty-lefty splits are still not great. He is significantly better as a right-handed hitter against left-handed pitchers, and unfortunately, there's not too many left-handed pitchers in Major League Baseball. But against right-handed pitchers as a lefty, he just isn't the same guy. 300-point difference in his OPS, and the sample size is pretty small. He could get that better, but we've seen that in his career. The one thing I think is promising about Wander Franco are his home-away splits. In the past, he could not hit at Tropicana Field, but now he's actually doing significantly better at home than on the road. And it just shows sample sizes are still young for Wander Franco, especially on a year-to-year basis. So it's one of those things where he wasn't bad at home. It just shows that he wasn't great that particular year. It's not a long-running event like some players have. So here's his numbers. And last year, if you remember, was Wander Mania. It was insane. People were going nuts for his cards. He's actually down about 63% year over year, even though he leads Major League Baseball in WAR, and he's one of the best offensive shortstops, if not the best offensive shortstop. Actually, Bo Bichette's there, so maybe the second in Major League Baseball right now. So we can see he's down a ton. His sales volume starting to increase slightly, but not really. Are his cards undervalued? Is there a buy with Wander Franco? Let me know what your thoughts are on him, simply because he had such hype and now he's performing, but no one's really paying attention. And last up, I want to look at one more player. But first thing, what second baseman has the most home runs ever in one season? I can almost guarantee that most people won't get this, but it's Marcus Semien with 45 home runs when he was with Toronto, I think 2 years ago. Pretty crazy to see Marcus Semien as that leader. He moved from shortstop to second base, and one thing I want to point out is in Oakland, and he was a pretty good ball player. I remember watching him when Billy Butler played at the A's for a few years, and he was always league average, right? 98 OPS plus, 99, 97, 95, and then it just clicked in 2019, right? A 140 OPS plus, top 3 MVP finish with 8.5 WAR, which is crazy. And all of a sudden, he became like a perennial MVP candidate, you could say. I know he only has one other MVP appearance in 2021 with top 3, but that was 7.1 WAR. The next season was 5.7 WAR, and he's trending for another 7 WAR season right now, which is crazy to see for Marcus Semien. But overall, 136 OPS plus. He is 32 years old. Is that too old for the hobby? You know, he has a very interesting, if he can continue having these type of years for 4 more years, right? If he has 4 more 7 WAR seasons, that's going to be 28 more career WAR, going to push him up to over 60. His Hall of Fame case gets interesting. I'm not saying that's likely at all, but it's a conversation card collectors always seem to have. Once a player has success for an extended period of time, then they start to put money behind that player. And is Marcus Semien finally breaking out in the hobby? I want to hear what your guys' thoughts are on him. We can look at his Baseball Savant percentile rankings, none of which really are too crazy. The only few things he's really consistently good at, you know, red is good on these lists. He doesn't chase much, and his outs above average are really high. His sprint speed's always pretty good with percentage, and his strikeout percentage, but he generally is not hitting the ball with a ton of authority compared to a lot of players in Major League Baseball, a lot of blue on his page, and his expecting batting average isn't as high for someone that you would hope, you know, if like saying maybe he's a Hall of Famer. Over his entire career, the highest he's ever hit was 285 in 2019, and then 265 in 2021. I'd love to see him get that a little bit higher if he can, but he doesn't really quite get the quality needed to get to that point. His Hall of Fame stats, we can see he averages 4.9 WAR for every 162 games. That's on pace for a shortstop. He moved to second base, so that will actually change to a second base position. But overall, his comparisons are like Dansby Swanson, Didi Gregorius, Juan Uribe. They're not necessarily Hall of Famers, if that makes sense. But at the same time, if you have extended success, the baseball writers love people who are good for a while or have a good peak. And he's having a decent peak so far, so maybe he will be the exception to the rule. So in the comments below who you like, who you don't like, who you think could be a breakout. You tell me. I'd love to hear your thoughts on all these players, and I will see you in the next video.